Hey guys, Rolando Rodriguez here with Xgains.com. We got workouts that work, eats that satisfy, and everything else you need to reach your lifestyle goals. So I want to make a video today about a topic that was asked about on the Keto August Challenge group on Facebook. Somebody in the challenge group had somebody reach out to them and said, here's what I think about, or here's what I know about the ketogenic diet. And they sent them a Mayo Clinic review on the ketogenic diet. And nicely asked them, hey, what's your rebuttal to this? So forwarded it along to me, and here are my thoughts. We're gonna break down the Mayo Clinic's review, and I'm gonna sort of hit each paragraph topic by topic. Part 1, Mayo Clinic says, how does it work? Bring on the bacon, is how it starts off. It says, this high-fat, very low-carbohydrate diet typically means eating fewer than 50 grams of carbs a day, less than 4 slices of bread. Depends what type of bread you're eating, because some types of bread, you might only get 2 slices. But overall, that's correct. I personally stick to 50 grams total carbs on a regular basis a day, and most of my clients are able to get into ketosis eating about 50 grams of carbs. Next paragraph, what it promises. Getting most of your calories from fat forces your body to use different energy pathways. Instead of carbs for energy, the body burns fat, entering a state of ketosis. Correct, Mayo Clinic. Next paragraph, the upside. While the precise mechanisms are unclear, ketosis is thought to have brain-protecting benefits. As many as half of young people with epilepsy had fewer seizures after following the diet. That's true. The ketogenic diet can help with autoimmune, epilepsy, autism, even schizophrenia. And the way it does that is by actually providing the brain energy in the form of ketones. Some people cannot process or metabolize carbohydrates correctly in the brain. The brain can't utilize the sugar as fuel. So the alternate fuel source, or another fuel source, in my opinion, the preferred fuel source for the brain, ketones can be utilized by the brain. In that same section, they continue. And some early research suggests it may have benefits for blood sugar control among people with diabetes. Not it may, it does. Let's continue. An upcoming study will look at the ketogenic diet as a weight maintenance strategy. Stephen Fenney, Jeff Follock, Tim Noakes have all talked about this for years now. There are a couple of people that I've been following for a number of years, doctors and scientists actually doing research and actually treating type 2 diabetes and getting it under control via a low carb or ketogenic diet. These guys aren't just out there saying stuff without backing it up with actual science and patients that they test this stuff on to prove how it works, why it works, and that it does work. So it's not that type 2 diabetes can get under control with a low carb diet. It pretty much does get type 2 diabetes under control. So it may not benefit type 2 diabetics, for sure it does. And one of the guys that I mentioned, Tim Noakes himself, wrote pretty much the Bible. I was following him when I used to eat a bunch of carbs because he wrote the Bible on carb loading before marathon races. He actually had a TED Talk on the topic of carb loading before a race. Well, guess what? When he realized that he was becoming type 2 diabetic, he was like, what? So he went back to his studies and realized that the studies on himself, that he was actually becoming more insulin resistant throughout the years, but he still believed in carb loading. He knew about the ketogenic diet, he knew about the Atkins diet, and he really didn't want to go that route because he thought it was sort of kooky. But when a couple of his friends actually, I think, wrote the foreword or were, some part of actually rewriting the new Atkins book for like the 2000s, he said, wait a minute, if these guys think that this diet will work, there's something I need to look into. He actually did, and actually eventually ended up reversing his type 2 diabetes. And Tim Noakes is an amazing, amazing person. Just if you think about the fact that he had a medical and scientific career based on carb loading, and he preached that and wrote a book that a bunch of people and professional athletes bought and actually followed to carb load before races, and contradicted himself and said, guess what? I was wrong. This is what we gotta do. Before a race, become fat adapted. Learn to get the energy that's stored, the thousands upon thousands of calories that's stored on your body. That way you won't have to carb load. That way you won't have to poop mid-race. Yeah, it happens. I don't know. I've never done it, but I've heard stories and it doesn't sound good. So anyways, Tim Noakes pretty much put his career on the line, and rightfully so came out and said, because he's a self-respecting, righteous dude, hey, I was wrong. Here's what I've learned now. This next paragraph is noted as the downside. While the research is exciting, there's very little evidence to show that this type of eating is effective or safe over the long term for anything other than epilepsy. Last time I checked, people with epilepsy were people. They metabolize their food in their gut pretty much the same way we do. They have the same pathways to acquire energy that we do. So if their body is not functioning correctly on a carb-centric diet, and they switch to getting most of their energy from fats, and their body works properly, that means that if we work properly with carbs, we're also gonna work properly with fat, because we're people too. People with epilepsy are people, people without epilepsy are people. So if people with epilepsy can follow a ketogenic diet for the long term without any side effects, and actually with benefits to their health and their well-being, then we should be able to follow the ketogenic diet long term too. Only makes sense if you think about it. And they continue with the downside. Plus, very low carbohydrate diets tend to have higher rates of side effects, including constipation, headaches, bad breath, and more. Well, here's your thing. Constipation, every single time you switch your diet from heavy load carbs to heavy load fat, there's gonna be maybe not necessarily constipation, but there's gonna be a day or two where your poop's not right, because the enzymes that are associated with breaking down carbs aren't the same as breaking down fat. So if you're mainly eating carbs, your body's gonna be producing the enzymes to break down those carbs. More carb breaking down enzymes than fat. But if you switch over to fat, your body's gonna have to readjust and say, wait, we need to produce more of these enzymes that are gonna break down the fat and less of the enzymes that are gonna break down the carb. Not really constipation, just at the time of day where you go to the restroom might change a little bit. But in terms of constipation itself, people who follow the ketogenic diet, a side effect is constipation, but it's only because they're not following it correctly. They're not keeping up their water intake, they're not keeping up their sodium intake, and they're not probably getting enough magnesium. If you're eating the dark leafy greens that you should be, if you're uptaking your salt intake as you should be to help retain the water, because you're gonna be expelling water when you're decreasing the amount of carbs that you have in your body, because carbs help retain water, you shouldn't be constipated. Now, in terms of headaches, I personally always get headaches when transitioning into a ketogenic diet. And the reason is the carb withdrawal. Your brain wants to utilize the quick energy of carbs. So all of a sudden your brain is quote unquote addicted to carbs, and it doesn't have any carbs anymore to get its energy. So it has to switch over to fat. And to do that, it's gonna literally withdraw from the carbs, and you're gonna get a headache. But guess what? It goes away after 24, certainly for me after 48 hours. And for almost all the clients that I've had, after 72 hours of being on a ketogenic diet, the headaches are gone. And once you stay in ketosis, that's not gonna be an issue. In terms of bad breath and more, yes, when someone gets into ketosis, they might be overproducing ketones, at which point some of the ketones might be expelled from your mouth or your sweat, right? So when you're exhaling, like breathing out. But guess what? The longer you're in ketosis, the more your body becomes accustomed to utilizing ketones as energy, so you become more efficient. Therefore, you will produce the amount of ketones that you utilize, and you won't have to expel them through your breath. So that side effect goes away if you stay in ketosis. But the thing is, people get into ketosis, then get out of ketosis, then get into ketosis, and get out of ketosis. So they're constantly bringing the funk. But if you stay in ketosis, your funk days will pass you as soon as your body levels out the amount of ketones that it's producing with the amount of energy that you're utilizing. Finally, the Mayo Clinic's verdict. While the ketogenic diet may be recommended for some people with uncontrolled epilepsy, the high fat content, and especially the high level of unhealthy saturated fat, combined with limits on nutrition, rich fruits, vegetables, and grains, is a concern for long-term heart health. Here's the thing. If people with epilepsy can eat the ketogenic diet long-term and they don't have long-term heart health, we should be able to utilize the ketogenic diet and not have long-term heart health. On top of that, a well-formulated ketogenic diet is 1,000 times more nutritious than the standard American diet. All of those grains that you're eating with the standard American diet, for the most part, are enriched with nutrients because the nutrients have been completely stripped from the grains. Now, let's say that you are eating whole grains or you're eating more nutritious grains. Still, animal products have more bang for their buck in terms of nutrition than grains do. Just think about apes. It might have been Tim Noakes who I heard it from, but pretty much the apes have these distended, huge guts, which they need because they need to break down the fibrous vegetables that they spend all day eating because they're massive and strong, but they have to eat a ton of vegetables to get that massive and strong, and they have these huge guts. Humans evolved to say, hey, guess what? We're gonna let the animals do the hard work. We're gonna have small guts, and we're gonna be able to move and actually function throughout the day without having to sit there and digest our food on a regular, constant basis because we're letting the animals do the hard work of breaking down the vegetables. So when we eat the animal products, especially if you're gonna eat the organ meats, the nutrition in those things are insane. You can eat less on a well-formulated ketogenic diet and hit all your nutrition for that day than if you were following a standard American diet. You would have to eat more fruits, you'd have to eat more vegetables, more enriched grains, because you're substituting the nutrient rich, even though this didn't even talk about the nutrient richness of animal products with everything else. Yeah, I believe in eating vegetables. But don't tell me that you can't get your nutrients from eating animal products, especially if you're hitting up those organ meats. Now, on top of that, they talk about eating all those unhealthy saturated fat. Here's the thing. If you're not eating any carbs and you're in a ketogenic state and you're eating a low carb, high fat diet, your body's fuel source is primarily gonna be pulled from saturated fat. So that unhealthy saturated fat actually is becoming your fuel source. Companies were out there, they started making low fat foods for us. They put the fear of God and red meat and fat in us, and we followed. The consumption went down. Whole milk practically got, vanished from the grocery store. Eggs were, hurting. And the yolks, I don't know how many of those we threw away. And where are we? We followed their recommendation. We went higher carb, low fat, lower meat. Just look at the epidemics that's going on today. I don't understand how people still want to back this science. We did it. And guess what? Big companies didn't force it down our bodies. We, as consumers, said we're going to listen to the recommendations from our government, and we're buying stuff that is quote unquote healthy. And big business said, you know what? We're going to give them what they want, because in the end, they're in it to make money. If we switch what we want, they're going to switch what they're going to give us. And it's evident when you go to the grocery store today, just over the last couple of years. So anyways, that's it for the review of the Mayo Clinic take on ketosis and my rebuttal to what they were saying. I don't know when the article was written. It was just sent to me, and I thought that I'd make a video about it because it sort of gets me a little bit fired up, and there's just some information in there that if you think about it doesn't really make sense, and other information that's just wrong. But that's it for now. This is Rolando Rodriguez with xgains.com. Please let me know if you got any questions or comments down below. Please like, subscribe, and share to this channel. If you haven't done so already, I greatly appreciate it. The website again is that's the symbol, not the word, gains.com. And I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Peace.